What are we going to do? Asked Connie the cleric. Wally the wizard said, Leave it to me. I have it under control. Well, Fred the fighter, Rachel the rogue, and Connie the cleric certainly hoped that Wally had it under control, because there were at least 1,000 villagers, primitive tribesmen, that any dozen of them alone would be easy enough for the party members to deal with. But 1,000 would overwhelm them many times over. And Wally the wizard said, See, I can tell over there that those plants, they're not natural. They've been attacking part of the village. I will show them that the fire itself will serve me. So he stepped forward and he raised his hands, and all the villagers, they stood back because they recognized something strange about this man in the robes. He pulled from his pocket a leather pouch, poured out some sulfur in one hand, and then from a little tub he pulled out some bat guano, and he said the mystical words and then opened his hands towards the bonfire in the center of the village. And rising up was a giant fire elemental. And Wally said, Go, destroy those evil plants. And the villagers, they all shrunk back as the fire elemental left the fire pit, went over, and began burning the plants that had strangled several buildings in their village. And pretty soon, the party were being treated like gods. Hey everybody, welcome to Arcane Wednesday. I'm your host, DM Gallibond. Today, for November 4th, 2020, we are going to be talking about the Conjure Elemental spell. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at this spell. We're going to, as we usually do, go through from the earliest time it appeared in a game and bring it up to 5th edition and just see how this spell evolves over time. Now, as you might imagine, Conjure Elemental is a summoning spell, and it lets you summon an elemental ally. But there are a few tricks to this. Okay, going all the way back to original D&D. D&D, the way Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson intended it to be played. 240-foot range, and it would last as long as you could concentrate. There was no set duration. It was just as long as you could concentrate. And it would summon one 16-hit die elemental. Now, in those days, there was no such thing as CR, but hit dice kind of correlated to CR. So a 16-hit die creature back in those days was probably equivalent to about, a 12 to 15 CR monster today. So that's a big darn deal. And it's bigger than most elementals are today. So the spell allows the caster to summon any one elemental, armor class -2, hit dice 16, damage per attack 3d8. Caster can only summon one of each type of elemental: earth, air, fire, and water in one day. Elemental will perform any task within its power, carrying, attacking, etc., as long as the caster maintains control by concentrating. Caster cannot fight, cast other spells, or move over half their normal speed, or else they will lose control. And if losing control, you can't regain it, and the elemental will want to kill the caster. Uh, and it will want to slay its summoner and may attack anyone in its path while pursuing the summoner. So this is the trick with elementals. Yes, as long as you maintain control, they're perfectly fine. You lose control, and oh, Katie bar the door. It's just kind of gonna go on a rampage, and well, in this edition, it's going to specifically go after the summoner. Other editions, not necessarily, but it just starts attacking anything that's around it. Dispel magic or dispel evil can return an uncontrolled elemental to its plane, but as long as the summoner maintains control, they can dismiss it back to its plane with, just by concentrating. So that is the original version of the spell. Now in AD&D or First Edition, and I should say this was a 5th level spell for magic users. And in AD&D, it's also a 5th level spell for magic users. And now it has a set duration, 1 turn per level. And there's 4 different spells. So you have to you have to choose which one you are going to summon when you memorize the spell. So you have to have some material components here. Sulfur and phosphorus for fire, soft clay for earth elemental, burning incense for air elemental, and water and sand for water elemental. And you have to have a natural source. So, to summon a fire elemental, you must have a fire source in addition to having the material components. A large body of water needs to be nearby to summon a water elemental, etc., etc. And it's possible to conjure up successive elementals of different types if the spellcasters memorize 2 or more of these spells. Must be decided on it before memorizing the spell. Concentrate on the elemental doing his or her commands, or will turn on the magic user and attack. The elemental, however, will not cease combat to do so, but it will avoid creatures when seeking its conjure. Magic user is wounded or grappled, his or her concentration is broken. There's no save to check to see if you made. It's just, oh, hey, you got wounded. You lost concentration. When the DM chuckles, it's too late. There's always 5%. And now notice this. There's always a 5% chance the elemental will turn on its conjure regardless of concentration. This check is made at the end of the second and each succeeding round. So this was a thing where it's just like, yeah, it's a ticking time bomb. At some point, you keep this thing around long enough, you're eventually going to lose control of it. I guarantee it. So yeah, this is an indication that they put the spell in there, and then they think, yeah, it might be a little bit too powerful. So let's just make sure that at some point they're going to lose control, so that they think long and hard about summoning an elemental again. All right, so that is first edition, and second edition is almost identical, almost absolutely identical. And then an elemental that breaks previous control can be dispelled by the caster, but the chance of success is only 50%. Elemental can be controlled up to 30 yards away per level of the spellcaster. Elemental remains until its form in this plane is destroyed due to damage, or until the spell's duration expires. And again, that's 1 turn per level. And for those of you who are not familiar with the old rules, A turn is a period of time lasting 10 minutes. So if you're a 10th level caster, it's around for 10 turns or 100 minutes. Hour and 40 minutes, right? Yeah, okay. Then in 3rd edition, there was no Conjure Elemental spell. There was a succession of Summon Monster 1 through 9 spells. And these were doled out to bards, clerics, and sorcerers and wizards at every level. So at 1st level, you got a Summon Monster 1. And at Summon Monster 1, you could summon a 1st level monster. Now, I think you had to be, okay, so elemental is, small elemental is like 4th level? 5th level? No, medium elemental is 5th level. So you had to get summon monster 5 or monster summoning 5. Summon monster 5 before you could do an elemental. Then at 6 you get a large elemental. At 7 you get a huge elemental. At 8 you get greater elemental. And at 9 you could get an elder elemental. Now, there were actually, in the monster manual for this edition, there were actually different size categories for elementals, the same way that 5th edition has age categories for dragons. So, you would have a fairly tough elemental that would be a medium, then a bigger elemental that would be a large, and then, all the way up to like the elder elementals. Yeah, those are bad boys you don't want to mess around with. But they followed the rules of the monster summoning. So they okay, when you use summoning spell to summon an air, chaotic earth, evil fire, good lawful, or water creature spell of that type. So in other words, it just doesn't have the same rules in terms of losing control that the other ones did. So now of course, yeah. So, and also what is the duration here? Duration. Casting time, in fact, duration is 1 round per level. So these also don't last nearly as long. So instead of lasting 10 minutes per level, they last, I think it's 6 seconds per level. Because I think they had gone to 10 rounds per minute by 3rd edition, which is the standard now. Back in the old days, it used to be 10 seconds per round. So 6 rounds per minute. And then 5th edition. Well, 5th edition, casting time 1 minute, so it's not something you can use in combat. Lasts for an hour. You call forth an elemental servant. Choose an area of air, earth, fire, or water that fills 10-foot cube within range. Elemental challenge rating 5 or lower, appropriate to the area. Appears in an unoccupied space within 10 feet of it. So, now, here's the kind of creatures that you will get, and it really depends on the area, and it depends on your caster level. When you cast a spell using a slot of 6th level or higher, challenge rating increases by 1 for each slot level above 5th. So at 5th level, you can conjure something up to a CR 5. 6th level up to a CR6. Now, they don't give you any other things, so then it's up to the DM to decide if there's other, elemental type creatures that you might be able to summon. But CR4, or CR1 quarter, a steam method. CR1 half, dust, ice, magma, or methods, or magnon. CR2, gargoyle or azer. Then all your standard air, earth, fire, water elementals, and salamanders and Zorn at CR5, and an invisible stalker at 6. So now notice that this is for wizards and for druids in this edition of the game. Now, of course, there's no Conjure Elemental or monster summoning in 4th edition. But, hey, our caveat is back. If your concentration is broken, Elemental doesn't disappear. Instead, you lose control and it becomes hostile towards you and your companions, and it might attack. Okay, at that point, it's like hostile, but I suppose it depends on the kind of elemental and how intelligent it is. And if it's intelligent and if it's greedy and if you are able to give it some shinies or whatever it likes, it may decide, okay, I'm not going to attack you, but I'll take your gold and I'll go home. So that's a possibility. All right. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of Arcane Wednesday. I have been DM Gallibond. Thank you guys for coming out here. Hope you have enjoyed this show. If you do like it, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video, click on the post notification bell so that you'll be notified every time new content drops on the channel. And with that, I'm just going to wish you all a good night. Take care, everybody.